The Midnight Sun, Fear's Fever Dream. Season 3, Episode 10, written by Rod Serling, staged in a sweltering New York where 5 minutes to midnight still looks like high noon. Neighbors flee north, water is rationed, electricity sputters, and 2 women remain as witnesses to a world that feels sentenced to burn. Norma paints the heat because that is what her mind is seeing, and Mrs. Bronson begs her to paint coolness because that is what her heart is praying for. A Course in Miracles teaches that perception follows choice, and choice is always of the mind before it becomes a world. So the easel becomes a confessional, and each brushstroke is a decision about what is real. Paint the sun and the room grows hotter, not because pigments generate temperature, but because fear supplies the meaning. Paint a waterfall and a dying woman tastes coolness, not because oils turn to water, but because faith momentarily outruns terror. The radio voice cracks on the air and stops reading the script, and in that break the city's mask falls. Police have abandoned the streets, citizens must defend themselves, and the fragile doctrine called order evaporates like the glass of water by the window. A stranger forces the door, drinks without asking, and then collapses into shame, insisting he is a decent man who lost his wife and baby to the heat. He is both thief and brother, both desperation and innocence, and the pivot between those faces is forgiveness. Norma's recognition is the first cold breeze the episode allows. The thermometer continues to rise, the paint on the buildings begins to run, and Mrs. Bronson slides into a childlike reverie at the sight of a waterfall on canvas. She dies smiling, baptized in an imaginary pool that still leaves a ring of grace. Norma alone watches the mercury push past 1:30 and shatter, and then she screams and the film itself snaps. The cut reveals the deeper dream, the inversion that turns noon into midnight and fire into ice. Outside the window, snow falls. The thermometer reads below zero, and a doctor explains that the world is not moving toward the sun, but away from it. Within weeks, there will be no warmth left at all, he says, and the kindness in his voice can't find anything to warm. Norma whispers, "Isn't it wonderful to have darkness and coolness?" And Mrs. Bronson's face freezes into the knowledge that this wish is the latest disguise of despair. Rod Serling steps in to call it a minor exercise in the care and feeding of a nightmare, and the phrase lands like a diagnosis. Care and feeding is how a mind keeps fear alive. It feeds on thermometers, on forecasts, on ration schedules, on looters and locked doors, and then congratulates itself for staying informed. It feeds on suns and on snows, on too much and on too little, on the arithmetic of doom, where all sums are negative. Hot and cold are not opposites in this tale, but twins, 2 poles of the same magnet pulling attention into form. The ego offers relief by switching polarity, promising sanctuary in the direction opposite the pain it just sold. If noon burns, the ego offers midnight, and if midnight freezes, the ego offers noon, and the carousel keeps turning. A Course in Miracles teaches that suffering is not healed by choosing a different temperature, but by questioning the thermostat itself. The thermostat is the belief that the body is home and the world is cause. As long as that belief holds, the canvas will inherit every fear the mind refuses to release. Norma's vocation makes the metaphor literal, but this is everyone's studio. Thought is the brush, attention the solvent, faith the fixative, and the scene on the wall is nothing but the last conviction made visible. This is why the looter matters. He says he is not a housebreaker even as he stands inside a house he broke into, and the contradiction is the human condition in one line. Identity tries to outrun behavior, and behavior tries to justify identity, and both are begging to be forgiven. Forgiveness here is not a ledger adjustment, but the refusal to fix identity to a moment of terror. It is the recognition that fear behaves like heat stroke and then pleads for water. Water in this episode is more than rationed liquid. It is the symbol of mercy, the cooling of a mind that has boiled itself on its own projections. When Mrs. Bronson asks Norma to paint a pastoral, she is praying for a purpose shift. Paint a purpose that heals rather than a purpose that indicts. Choose a witness for peace rather than a witness for catastrophe. The miracle is not that the room becomes cold, but that the chooser becomes sane. Then the twist arrives to expose the last refuge of the ego, which is polarity itself. If you hated noon, you will love midnight, and if you hated heat, you will adore cold. But either way, the dream wins and the dreamer sleeps. Serling's phrase, "the poles of doom," is perfect because doom has poles only in a world that believes salvation is a function of weather. Truth has no Mercury and no orbit. Truth does not offer better angles to the sun. Truth does not threaten or console by degrees. A Course in Miracles teaches that what is real cannot be threatened, and what is unreal does not exist, and the episode makes that clinical line unforgettable. Both worlds are unreal because both are built on fear and measured by instruments that can only count absence or excess. If there is too much light, it burns. If there is too little light, it kills, and both numbers are wrong about light. Light is not a number, and love is not a climate. The title, "The Midnight Sun," is the riddle that points beyond weather. Midnight that is noon is not a paradox to solve, but a flag that you are still dreaming time. Noon that becomes midnight is not a twist to interpret, but a mirror to show that the narrative is feeding itself. When Serling calls the piece minor, he is measuring scale, not depth. The depth is abyssal because it shows how the mind will accept any end as long as the dream gets to be right. It will liquefy the city and call it truth, or ice it over and call that truth. And the only untried option is waking. Waking begins where painting changes purpose. Paint the same room with the same hands and a different teacher. Paint the same world with the same materials and a different meaning. A Course in Miracles teaches that a miracle does not change the picture, it changes the viewer. The brush does not cool the room, it frees the mind that invented heat and cold as punishments. From that vantage, the looter becomes a brother. The ration line becomes a classroom, and the thermometer becomes a prop returned to the prop closet. Not because the story refuses realism, but because sanity refuses worship of the prop. Fear is the fever dream, and the cure is not ice on the forehead or sun on the skin, but a quiet mind that remembers it was never exiled from peace. The show ends, but the lesson refuses to. Every time a headline offers a new temperature to panic about, the episode knocks on the door. Every time a voice on the radio breaks from its script and dread rises in the throat, Serling's phrase returns like a prescription label. Stop the care. Stop the feeding. Choose a different caretaker for the mind. Hear now a closing in the cadence of the man in the dark suit, standing between worlds with a stopwatch you cannot see. Witness a room where noon lays a scorching hand on midnight, where a canvas melts and then freezes, where a thermometer breaks and a fever confesses the plot. What you have watched is the orbit not of a planet, but of a thought, tracing its ellipse around fear until there is no shade left to hide in. Call it heat if you like, or call it cold if you must, but its proper name is a nightmare tended like a garden by a very devoted dreamer. Submitted for your approval and for your release is a simple alternative. Put down the brush that paints disaster, and the world's sun will keep its distance because a forgiven mind no longer needs it to come closer or go away. This has been the midnight sun, where even at midnight it is high noon, and even at high noon it is midnight, until the dreamer wakes and the weather quits.